Hello, my name is Zachary Stewart, and I am a current junior at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I am a double major in African American Studies and Legal Studies at the university, and this presentation is about Black activism at UMass with regard to the creation of the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of African American Studies as it was, and the current Black student activism that's happening now, and how to bridge these two connections together. So this first section is in regards to what New Africa House was originally before the creation of the W.E.B. Du Bois Department. And what it was originally was a dorm known as George Mills House. And, you know, Mills House was a white dorm, as most of them were uh, in the 70s and 80s, and so students felt, or excuse me, Black students felt as though they weren't adequately represented on campus, and so they decided to come together and come together and fight back against the overt and covert racism they were subjected to. And in doing so, one of the ways in which they did this was the taking over of Mill's house. And, and that takeover lasted for a long time. I'm not entirely sure on how long, but lasted for a while. And, they essentially threatened the white students that were in the dorm, and they told them to get out. And if they didn't get out, they would be, they would be harmed. So they essentially forced the white students out, and that eventual takeover led to, or just before the takeover ended, uh, there was a list of demands that was drafted up by these students that I will talk about next. The demands that students had were in regards to the creation of an African American Studies department, and not just a department, but Black faculty, Black staff, and just to turn Mills House into something that was unapologetically Black, and understood that Blackness is culture. Blackness is love. Blackness is life. Blackness is everything. So they wanted a space where they could be unapologetically themselves and understand that in that space, that they were free. They were free to be themselves and free to understand that uh, it it's necessary to be yourself in a space, in a predominantly white space. So when the department was first created, there was a barbershop, there was a restaurant, there was a lounge space. There was so much life at New Africa, and over time, a lot of it was used, and over time, though, the university started to pull away and started to take away that funding until there was almost nothing left, which I will talk about next. So now I'd like to transition into the 21st century with regards to the the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, and after that horrible, horrible incident, horrible racist hate crime that happened. Students here at UMass myself included, came together and were trying to think of ways to support protesters in Minneapolis, as well as uh, force the administration here to make a change. And so the idea came up after long talks to come up with the Racial Justice Coalition. And said coalition came together of with the idea of having ideas and actions students could take to, push admin to take action against racism that was happening and that still continues to happen on campus, and do what they can to prevent it and ensure that when racist incidents do happen, there are systems in place that actually help students instead of further harming them. And so there are 5 subgroups in total in which this group came together: actions against racism, academic equity, healing amidst racism, preventing racism, and police abolition. And I'll go into the demands that we had sent to the administration in a bit. One other thing I forgot to mention was that New Africa House was the hub of where a lot of, or almost all, cultural organizations at the time were housed, and so they were able to come together and exchange ideas and just be in community with one another. But over time, the university started to take away that funding and take away the resources that New Africa House had. And now we see, going into the 21st century, and specifically 2022, New Africa House is essentially split up. The first floor, uh, half of it belongs to the Center for Women and Community, and the Center for Women and Community, which is a rape crisis center as well as sexual health and wellness center. They are housed entirely on the second floor as well, and the other half of the first floor belongs to the Augusta Savage Gallery. Uh, and the third floor is where the classrooms and offices are for the African American Studies Department. The fourth floor is a swing space, which in turn, which is what the university calls it when they have to renovate certain spaces on campus, and so they put departments and other places and spaces on the fourth floor, and we don't have access to that. And on the second floor, there is a room called the Shirley Graham Du Bois reading room that we don't have access to during the day because CWC needs the entire floor to be able to conduct their business. And there is also the basement, in which we have classrooms down there, and the New Africa House Theater, which was recently renovated. But as but as I've said, New Africa House is not what it used to be, and we just don't have the space anymore. And some of the demands that the Racial Justice Coalition sent to the administration that summer include the implementation of emergency floor meeting guidelines following an act of hate or bias, the implementing of a new procedure for an immediate email response from the Dean of Students Office following an act of hate or bias, the implementing of a new social justice general education requirement for all undergraduates, excuse me, the implementing of an anti-racist training for all students, faculty, and staff, the removal of the UMass Police Department presence from all residential areas, the investing in new and existing public safety resources at UMass, an increase in funding for academic resources for Black, Indigenous, people of color. And, again, these demands are not the only ones that we sent to the administration. We came up with 23 in total. and the document is what we refer to as a living document. So can it can be added to, it can be amended, it can be whatever students choose it to be, and these discussions are currently ongoing, which I will get into next. And so once we sent in the demands, then soon after began discussions, um, with regards to implementation. And there were two large group discussions with most, if not all, of the upper administration that was involved at the time, and there were a bunch of smaller group discussions with certain members of the upper administration as well as their staff in order to figure out how different different subsets of demands could be implemented. And so what we found was that those smaller groups worked better than the larger group conversations, mostly because there was a lot of feeling as though a lot of administrators were not down for implementation with regards to a lot of the demands, in particular the ones concerning uh, the the ones concerning the reallocation of police resources, campus police resources, towards other spaces on campus. And so and and talks eventually stalled from there. And to my knowledge, only two or three of the demands have been put into practice. And I'm working with administrators currently to figure out what's still on the table and what's not. And so, just this idea that, trying to understand what came before, in terms of the students that came before and what they did and how they were able to uh, push for change, and how to take those lessons and put them into practice now so that we can essentially merge all of these movements together and move forward into the future and make it so UMass is truly a safe and inclusive and wonderful learning environment for Black students, for brown students, for people of color, in a broader sense. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your patience as I walked through this presentation. And I look forward to discussing more and understanding what folks' thoughts are with regards to what I said, and how folks interpret what came across, and how to best collaborate and move forward into the future. So thank you.